go. Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. It's been good to see you all here, and I see where all of us have experienced the greatness of our Great Lakes with all the mayflies that have been buzzing around. But for this year, we are celebrating the cultural and geographic regions in the U.S. And during week 4 of the lecture series, we'll explore the region of the U.S. known as the Great Plains, the vast region of flat grasslands that stretches across North Central America and parts of Canada. And we're fortunate that Annika Schief is here today to kick off our week with an exploration of Lakota dances. Her talk today, Dances of the Lakota and the Massacre of Wounded Knee, will focus on how dance has served as a powerful form of celebration and resistance for the Lakota throughout the centuries. Annika is a graduate of the Juilliard School and the University of Arts and Bennington College, where she earned her master's. She has appeared on America's Got Talent, Sesame Street, and was a member of Groundwork's Dance Theater. Her choreography has been shown across the United States, and in 2016, she was awarded a Creative Workforce Fellowship from the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. She taught at Baldwin Wallace University and is currently on the faculty of Texas Christian University, where she teaches modern ballet and choreography. I would ask if you would please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me welcome Annika back to Orchestra Hall.
Okay, good morning everybody. It's so nice to spend the morning with you. I'm so glad you chose to be here and to spend a little bit of time learning about the dances of the Lakota people, and then we'll finish up by learning also about the Massacre of Wounded Knee. I will call into the space that my primary language is movement, and so whenever I have to hold space and speak for an hour, it's a little bit like, okay. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm sure it'll be fine, and you're all very warm and welcoming, so just bringing that forward. Okay, let's get started. Throughout the Americas, from Chile to Canada, the people have never stopped dancing. As the living dance, they are joined again with all the ancestors before them who cry out, who demand justice, and who call the people to take back the Americas. People have always been dancing. Right now, here at Lakeside Chautauqua, we are located on the tribal lands of Erie, Kaskaskia, Wyandotte, and Miami nations. It's very important for us as we move into this week, especially talking about the Great Plains, to just reference who was here before Europeans came. Today, we're going to be focusing on the Lakota people specifically and their clash with the colonizers. And we're going to be talking about the sun dance and the ghost dance specifically. But before we do that, I wanted to share a resource for all of you. I have to go out of this very organized moment into a less organized moment. But there are people who are working on creating maps of the world which are framed around indigenous nations. And this is an example of this, and I thought it might be interesting if somebody who's maybe not from Lakeside wants to share their zip code, and I can pop it in to this search, and we can see, okay, zip code 1. 48084. Okay. So that brings us to Troy, Michigan. And right now we can't really see anything, so I'm going to zoom out and zoom out. Okay. And you can start to see all of the different tribal peoples who live in and around this area of what we now call Troy, Michigan. Excellent. Do we have another zip code? 93277. Oh, California. Okay, great. Let's zoom out and see what we have going on. Great. And maybe 2 more. 34987. 34987? Okay. Okay, where are we? Let's see. So this is a really fun, okay, I said 2, so we gotta do one more. Calm down, everybody. So if you want to, it sounds like this is interesting to you. So if you want to take some time and go to nativeland.ca, you can do all types of interesting research on your own time. Okay, last one. 4418. Okay, 118. Which one is that? 4411. Okay. Okay, great. Where are we? Okay, not too far away. Great, just outside of the Erie people. Okay, great, yeah, so take some time to explore that research and that website on your own. Here we go. Thanks for sharing all of that. Okay, so just taking us back a little bit, what sort of relationships were happening between Native Americans and the Europeans? Annihilation was a word used frequently by the whites of that period. For those who think annihilation is too strong a word, consider that it has been estimated that there were 75 million Indians in the Americas, perhaps 6 million in the contiguous United States, when Columbus arrived. By 1900, only 237,000 Indians in the United States remained. So those numbers are staggering. So if you're in this boat of, I'm not really sure that I feel comfortable calling it an annihilation of an entire peoples, just think about 6 million people in the contiguous United States dropping down to 237,000. I feel pretty comfortable saying that's an annihilation of a peoples. So Columbus lands in the Bahamas in 1492 and begins his reign of terror. He begins enslaving and annihilating the native people from North of America, and this is a quote that comes directly from one of his own ship logs. He wrote, "It appears to me that the people are indigenous and would be good servants. I am one of the opinion that they would very readily become Christians as they appear to have no religion." So he's basically just documenting the fact that he thinks that these people would be very easy to enslave and to control. So how does manifest destiny play into all of this? Manifest destiny is a 19th century doctrine or belief that the expansion of the US throughout the America continents was both justified and inevitable. Quote, "An ideology of imperialism, manifest destiny, was used to justify the Mexican-American War and the genocide of Native Americans." From Robin Pritchard. And let's see if I can get this to play. This is just a short video which highlights really clearly the loss of land for the Native people. It's only like 10 seconds long. And you just see as time is going forward how much, it's just staggering how much land is taken. So, whoops, I'll go back. What is driving this massive expansion and these massive land grabs? It's basically just this idea of the American dream. This dream is driving people to conquer and take land that is not theirs. It's this just desire to have something that they can stake and claim and call their own. It's also a lot to do with mining and the gold rush and just the idea of, you know, American capitalism at large. Okay, so when you see this image is very iconic and something that we've all seen many times. What kind of comes into your brain? It's a bunch of white guys, okay. In the back. The Founding Fathers, okay. Destruction. Destruction. Good, great. A lot of people see this and they think RVs, hot dogs, road trips, America, patriotism, like this is America. And that's sort of, you know, the way that I was taught about this statue as a child. And as I got older, I gleaned a little bit more information about Mount Rushmore. Carving began in 1927, and this was a desecration of sacred land to the Lakota people. These mountains were called the Paha Sapa, or the Black Hills, is the epicenter of their spiritual world. They called this mountain the Six Grandfathers. It was illegally appropriated by whites when they broke the Fort Laramie Treaty because they found gold in this area in 1874. The US government offered to buy this land repeatedly from the Lakota, and every time they said, the land is not for sale. The Lakota were told to go to the reservation or be ready to be considered hostile. The people who did go to the reservations were promised food in the form of rations of some kind. Some chiefs did not bend to the white man's way, and because of this, a few battles broke out, and they were won by the Lakota, which only reinforced the white man's opinion that the Lakota were, quote, savages. In retaliation, the US Army instituted a sell or starve campaign to try to annex the Black Hills. Eventually, the Lakota were so hungry, they gave in and signed a new treaty in 1876, reducing the reservation space by 2/3 and losing the Black Hills. This led to a cramped living space, disease, trying to farm in possibly arid plains, new viruses killing livestock, children being sent to government schools where they were forced to practice Christianity and European American customs, and they were punished if they did not adopt or even if they tried to speak their own language. So the first image here is an image from the map that I shared with you, and you see the giant sort of hot pink area. All of this land was inhabited by the Lakota people. It was approximately 150 million acres. And then the second image is zoomed in a little bit, and you see this yellow area. This was where they were allowed to live after the Fort Laramie Treaty, which reduced their land to only 60 million acres. Then, and this is maybe a little harder to see, but then so the striped lines are the yellow that you just saw on the image before. So this is what they had, the land they had available to them in 1868 that was outlined during the Fort Laramie Treaty. Then it starts to be reduced into the next section, which is sort of the polka dotted area. That was known in 1876 as the Great Sioux Reservation after the US government took the Black Hills and the unceded Indian Territory. And then it reduces it even more to just the tiny black zones, which then became the smallest part of the reservations and which is more like where we're at today. And then this is basically just the same image that I showed in the video earlier. Okay. So, dance on Turtle Island. As the original inhabitants of Turtle Island, which is the indigenous term for North America, Native Americans developed cultures, languages, dances, and lifeways for at least 15,000 years before European ships ran aground on the continent. Dance has been integral to Native Americans retaining and evolving their identities in a changing continent for centuries. There's different ways of knowing things. There's different ways of moving through the world. And these people, dance is a way of knowing something that maybe you can't write down, or maybe you don't even have a word for in a written language or an oral language, but you feel it inside of your blood and you feel it inside of your bones, and you just have to dance about it. There's no other way to communicate that need, that necessity. And a lot of European American ways of knowing are not based on this embodied knowledge. They're based on research, they're based on science, they're based on linear pathways. And so there was a lot of misunderstanding that came from these rituals and these dances because of this clash of not understanding or being able to have a similar way of knowing that something wasn't real. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope that makes sense. Okay, so because of this, dance is integral for Native American in their part of their lives. It is woven throughout the secular and the spiritual. Dance performs functions and carries knowledge that's not present in any other forms. You see this in religious dances, dances for amusement, dances to give thanks, to ask for rain, to prepare for a hunt. There's all different kinds of reasons why they might want to dance or need to dance. And then inside of all of these different kinds of dances, war dances, snake dances, grass dances, fancy dances, sun dances, in all of the different tribes, they all have different variations of how these ceremonies are performed and practiced. They're all unique and individual. Dance is a distinct way of knowing and theorizing for Native Americans. It's an extension of the body. It's hard to put it into words, but it is something that you have to do it. You have to do the rain dance to bring the rain. There's no other way that this is going to happen. So the sun dance in Native tongue is called Wianyang Wachipi, and there are very specific things that have to happen in order for this ceremony to be successful. This is a dance that is performed primarily by the Plains tribes. It happens in the summer. It's a religious ritual. And it's a very, very sacred dance. And the purpose of it is to offer up personal sacrifice in order to support the community at large. The sun dance originated with the Plains tribes, specifically the Cheyenne and the Lakota. The oral traditions trace the ceremony to time immemorial. The dance is performed to renew the relationship between humans and the natural world through dancing and praying for all living things. One origin story comes from a vision of a man named Kablaya, who told a Lakota healer, Black Elk, how to prepare for the ceremony. It's a little bit hard to see, but this is a painting of a sun dance. And the specifics of the ceremony are going to vary from tribe to tribe, but there are some things that are generally about the same. So usually it takes 6 months to prepare the ceremony, and it's usually performed over the summer solstice. The ceremony is strongly associated with dreams and visions. The ceremony can last up to 4 days, and the third day of the ceremony usually falls on the full moon of that month. The elders in the community are the ones who have been through it many, many times, and they're guiding the people who are doing this for the first time. They're telling them what to expect. They're walking them through all of the expectations, and part of this is to blow on a bone whistle. They help them prepare not only mentally, because it is a very daunting thing to have to dance for 3 or 4 days while fasting before. They help them physically, they help them mentally prepared. This is an image of the ceremonial cottonwood tree, and the day before the ceremony is called Tree Day. The ceremonial cottonwood tree is cut down and painted and ritually placed in the center of the arbor, the sacred circle where the dance is going to happen. The cottonwood tree is said to be the spiritually strongest tree. If you can cut an upper limb of the tree, you will expose a 5-pointed star in the grain, and this is a sign of the Great Spirit. People make prayers and offerings and send them into the prayer ties, so like little pieces of fabric. They pray into them and send the wishes into it, and then they tie those up into the tree before it is put up for the ceremony. This dance is extremely taxing for the dancers. It's a test of their physical endurance. So another part of this is that they have to fast before the ceremony even begins. No food, no drink, and they have to go to a sweat lodge prior to the ceremony beginning. So they start this way each day of the ceremony, and the ceremony is performed in all weather. It doesn't matter. If the mayflies are swarming, you're going to do it. This is another image of the area where the sun dance would happen. Traditionally and historically, only the men are going to be doing the sun dance. The community felt that the women experience pain and sacrifice a lot every time there is a birth, and so the community feels that this dance can be a male contribution. However, nowadays in current time, if sun dancing is happening, it is open to whoever would like to participate as a dancer. Whoever is dancing or whoever has volunteered or is chosen to be a sun dancer, all of their family is going to be nearby, and they're going to watch over them and make sure they're okay and pray while this is all happening. This is just another image of people staying close by. Should have maybe had a warning before that one, sorry. So not every tribe uses the piercing of the skin as part of the ceremony, but the ones that do, they pierce the skin right over the pectoral muscles, and then they're attached to the cottonwood tree, and they have to lean away a little bit, and they have to dance while they're doing that while looking up into the sun. It usually lasts 3 or 4 days, like I said, but when they break free, they can be done with their dance. Another thing that happens, again, not in every tribe, is that there's a ceremonial act called red blankets, where strips of the forearm are cut off in an act of devotion. Like I said, not every tribe does the hanging from the pectoral skin. And traditionally, this dance uses drums, ceremonial pipe prayer, and sacred fire. And one of the things you can see very clearly in this image, one of the things that the dancers can do is bite on a hollow eagle bone to sort of ease the pain while they're trying to do all of this intense dancing while they've been fasting and through a sweat lodge. Sun dancers did die on occasion. This was something that they were made aware of before choosing to participate. They made this sacrifice willingly for the whole community, especially for future generations. The sun dance was always about making a sacrifice that uplifted future communities. So, like I said, they danced this way until the skin finally broke free. This dance was a keystone of the Lakota lifestyle until 1883, when the US government banned the sun dance, declaring that it was barbaric. This was part of the Religious Crimes Code of 1883, and this was just part of a larger effort to force assimilation on Native peoples. But remember, they've been here for 15,000 years doing this. Okay. I'll just go through this quickly. It isn't, so the religious codes of 1883 obviously were not the only legislation affecting Native American life. There were a lot of treaties and a lot of laws that were made and that were broken or that were changed and morphed over the years to fit whatever the current agenda of the government was in order to try to assimilate and oppress these people. Okay, the text is really small, but from 1600 through 1871, you have what is called the treaty-making era. So this is the first time that the government is trying to control what is happening. 1830 to 1850 is when we have the removal era. So this is when people are being very forcibly removed from their lands. This is falling straight in the middle of when the Trail of Tears happens. From 1850 to 1891, we start to form the reservation systems, starting to have removal policies give way to the reservation system, forcing Native people into places that are very, very far away from where they've been their entire lives. 1887 to 1934, we're moving into allotment and assimilation era. So this is when the Dawes Act of 1887 happens. Over time, 138 million acres of native land held went to 48 million acres. So 2/3 of the land loss happens during this time. We move into a reorganization policy period from 1934 to 1953. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 ended the allotment of reservations. 1953 to 1968 is a termination era. The government terminates the federal recognition of many tribes. This was enforced to push assimilation of these Native Americans into mainstream American society. So they're wanting these people to join into capitalist ideas and join suburban America instead of staying in their own designated areas. 1968 to 1994, self-determination. Federal Indian policy begins to support the concept of Indian self-determination, and then more where we're at now, the Indian Self-Governance Act of 1994 transfers control to tribal governments upon tribal request for certain federal programs. There's so much information on this one slide that I'm not able to get into at this time, but you can research any of these eras during your own free time and learn a lot more about our history with the Native people. So the ghost dance is super interesting. This is a picture of Vivoka. In 1888, a prophet named Vivoka, he became ill with a fever and he had a vision of peace and he took a trip to heaven. He saw God and everyone who had died long ago and everybody was happy. And God told him, stop fighting with the white people and live morally. If his people could do this, they would be reunited with the ancestors in a world where there was no death and no sickness. He delivered this message to his people, and it started to spread like wildfire throughout all of the chiefs, throughout all of the tribes, all over the United States. And he encouraged them to do this ghost dance, or this circle dance. This would bring their ancestors back to fight for peace and make the colonists leave, and the buffalo would return. This was a dance that was born out of a hope for a different future. Wanagi Wachipi means the spirit or ghost dance. There's a lot of specific things that have to happen for the ghost dance to be successful. It's got to be done every 6 weeks. You're supposed to fast for 24 hours prior to make sure that the body is purified, and you also have to swear off alcohol. You're supposed to wear 2 different sacred objects. It could be many different things, but examples of this are a feather or red paint. Dancers would often, if they had done a ghost dance before, at the end of it, you sort of fall out and you hopefully have visions come into your mind. And so when you come to, the next time you can go to a ghost dance, you can paint some of those visions on your face. And then the dancers had these individually painted shirts that they called ghost shirts, and they believed that these shirts were so powerful that they could prevent bullets from penetrating them. They gave them a lot of hope. There, very much like the sun dance, was a pole in the center of the circle, and this is where the medicine man or the leader of the ghost dance would be. And oftentimes, because these are happening on government-regulated reservations, if you were here on Thursday when I gave a talk about the cakewalk, I was talking about how often they would be doing their dance waving an American flag. Similarly here, on top of their tree in the center, they would put an American flag at the top to sort of indicate outwardly, this is not a problematic dance, this is not a call to insurrection, this is not a war dance, this is us just doing our own ceremony. Sometimes that was helpful, sometimes that was not. The dance begins with songs and prayers. It lasts for 4 or 5 days. And the dance is it's really simple. They stand in a circle. They put hands shoulder to shoulder. And because the dance wants to be very inclusive so that anybody can do it, all you do is step to the side. That's all you're doing, but you're doing it for like 5 days. That's a long time. It's performed in a circle, hands on shoulders. You move until you're literally so exhausted that you fall out and hopefully have a vision from God. After the dance is done, everybody must go to the river and bathe and cleanse themselves, and then you can return home and hope that this new future is going to come. How are you doing up to here? Okay, great. Okay, I am going to now play like a 15-minute video for you, so you can, hopefully you're already sitting back and relaxing, but we are going to go to the video now.
By 1890, No Indian people anywhere in the West lived freely on their own land. And even the reservations on which they struggled to survive were being broken up under the Dawes Act. Congress had cut appropriations. Rations were drastically reduced. There were deadly epidemics of measles, influenza, whooping cough. On the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, the Lakota medicine man Sitting Bull was living quietly in his cabin. He was still regarded with respect by those Lakotas who remembered the eerie accuracy of his visions during the days when they had fought Custer. But the Lakota were divided now, as they struggled to come to terms with the white man's world. And Sitting Bull had had another, more disturbing vision. This one told him that the worst fate that could befall a Lakota awaited him: to die at the hands of his own people. That fall, Sitting Bull had a visitor, a Minneconjou Lakota named Kicking Bear, just back from a train trip to the far west and bearing remarkable news. A ceremony called the Ghost Dance was sweeping through many tribes of the West. It was part of a message of hope for all Indian peoples, being preached by a Paiute medicine man and prophet named Wovoka.
My brothers, I bring you word from your fathers, the ghosts, that they are marching now to join you. Led by the Messiah, who came once to live on earth with the white man, but was killed by them. I bring to you the promise of a day in which there will be no white man to lay his hand on the bridle of the Indian's horse. When the red men of the prairie will rule the world. Wovoka.
Wovoka's gospel of salvation was filled with Christian as well as Indian elements. Men and women were first to purify themselves and forswear alcohol and violence. Then they were to dance in a large circle, chanting and appealing to the spirits of their ancestors. When they did, Wovoka promised, the whites would vanish. The buffalo would cover the earth again.
The ghost dance, I think, was it was a desperate prayer. They thought that, well, it may be possible that all of this has been a bad dream, or all of this is passing, and there will be the restoration of the world we knew and loved.
Like most Indians, Sitting Bull remained skeptical of the ceremony's promised powers. But he agreed to let the ghost dance be taught to those people at Standing Rock who wanted to learn it. In the Lakota version of the ceremony, the dancers wore special shirts, said to be stronger than the white man's bullets.
People wearing the sacred shirts and feathers now formed a ring. We boys were in it, all joined hands. Everyone was respectful and quiet, expecting something wonderful to happen. The leaders beat time and sang as the people danced, going round to the left in a sideways step. Occasionally, someone fell unconscious into the center. As each one came to, she or he slowly sat up and looked about, bewildered, and then began wailing inconsolably.
Pine Ridge Agency, November 12th, 1890. We need protection, and we need it now. Indians are dancing in the snow and are wild and crazy. The leaders should be arrested and confined at some military post until the matter is quieted, and this should be done at once. Daniel F. Royer.
Responding to the pleas of a frightened Indian agent, Washington dispatched General Nelson A. Miles with 5,000 troops, including the 7th Cavalry, Custer's old command. At Pine Ridge and Rosebud in South Dakota, the ghost dancers feared that the soldiers had come to attack them and fled to a remote plateau surrounded by cliffs, which nervous whites soon began calling the Stronghold. Meanwhile, at the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, Indian police, charged with keeping peace among their own people, heard a rumor that Sitting Bull was about to join the ghost dancers. 43 Lakota policemen were dispatched to bring Sitting Bull in. 2 troops of U.S. cavalry followed at a distance. Before dawn on December 15, 1890, the police burst into Sitting Bull's house, ordered him to his feet, and pushed him toward the door. Outside, Sitting Bull's followers began to gather, taunting the Lakota police, vowing to keep them from taking their leader. Sitting Bull hesitated, unsure of what to do. Then one of his supporters raised his rifle and shot one of the policemen. Both sides began firing. A Lakota policeman put a bullet through Sitting Bull's head. The last of his great visions had come to pass. Sitting Bull had been killed by his own people.
My grandfather's mother was one of the people who was from Sitting Bull's camp. And my grandfather would tell me that when Sitting Bull was killed, they had very few horses. So the few horses they had, they put the young children on and they walked to Bigfoot's camp. And that she wept as she walked. And she wept not only for Sitting Bull being killed the way he was, but also wept because she feared that she would not live to have children. And if she did have children, would they be Lakota?
Sitting Bull's grieving followers fled toward the Cheyenne River Reservation, where they joined a Miniconjou band led by a chief named Bigfoot. He had once been an enthusiastic ghost dancer, but he was no longer certain that the world would be transformed. Bigfoot decided to take his band into Pine Ridge and see if there wasn't some way to reconcile things. But General Miles misunderstood what Bigfoot was doing and ordered the 7th Cavalry under Colonel John Forsyth to intercept him. They caught up with Bigfoot 3 days after Christmas. The chief was riding in a wagon, too ill with pneumonia even to sit up. But he flew a white flag to show his peaceful intentions. The soldiers transferred Bigfoot to an army ambulance and then led his band down to a little creek for the night. It was called Wounded Knee. There were 120 men and 230 women and children. The soldiers distributed rations. An army doctor did what he could for Bigfoot. But the soldiers also posted 4 cannon on the top of a rise overlooking the camp.
The following morning, there was a bugle call. Then I saw the soldiers mounting their horses and surrounding us. It was announced that all men should come to the center for a talk. Bigfoot was brought out of his tent and sat, and the older men were gathered around him. Deweybeard.
Charles Allen, a reporter for a Nebraska newspaper, watched from the hilltop.
At the southeast edge of the group of standing Indians, there was a fair-sized plat of grass, where, in all the exuberance of early youth, were 8 or 10 Indian boys dressed in the gray school uniforms of that period. The fun they were having as they played bucking horse, leapfrog, and similar games carried the mind for a fleeting moment back to the days of boyhood.
Troops began moving from teepee to teepee, confiscating knives and axes from the women, sometimes seizing a rifle. A medicine man began to dance. "Do not fear," he told the warriors, "but let your hearts be strong. Many soldiers are about us and have many bullets, but I am assured the bullets cannot penetrate us."
Suddenly, scooping up a handful of dirt, he tossed it scattering in the air, and with eyes turned toward heaven, implored the Great Spirit to scatter the soldiers likewise.
Almost simultaneously with him throwing a handful of dirt into the air, soldiers tried to disarm a man who was deaf. And he hung on to his rifle, and they kind of struggled over it, and it went off. These two things happened at the same time, and bang, I mean, it just blew everything up.
The soldiers opened fire with rifles, revolvers, and finally, a cannon that hurled exploding shells into the teepees. The Lakotas did their best to fight back. When the shooting finally stopped, some 250 men, women, and children were dead.
I walked around viewing the sad spectacle. On reaching the corner of the green where the schoolboys had been so happy in their sports but a short time before, there was spread before me the saddest picture I had seen or was to see thereafter. For on that spot of their playful choice were scattered the prostrate bodies of all those fine little Indian boys, cold in death. The gunfire had blazed across their playground in a way that permitted no escape. They must have fallen like grass before the sickle.
Dead, too, were 25 soldiers. Wounded Lakotas and wounded soldiers alike were taken to the Holy Cross Episcopal Church at Pine Ridge. Its walls were still hung with Christmas decorations.
Pews were torn from their fastenings, and armfuls of hay fetched by Indian helpers. Upon a layer of this, we spread quilts and blankets taken from our own beds. The victims were lifted as gently as possible and laid in 2 long rows on the floor. A pathetic array of young girls and women and babes in arms, little children and a few men, all pierced with bullets.
A young girl who had a ghost shirt on underneath her clothes said, "They told me if I put this on, the bullets would not go through," and I believed them. Now see where we are.
For several days, the dead Lakotas were left where they had fallen, while the army contended with sporadic fighting that broke out on the reservation. Finally, after a heavy snowfall, a burial party arrived at Wounded Knee, dug a pit, and dumped in the frozen bodies.
In the shine of photographs are the slain, frozen and black, on a simple field of snow. They image ceremony. Women and children dancing, old men prancing, making fun. In autumn there were songs, long since muted in the blizzard. In summer, the wild buckwheat shone like fox fur and quill work, and dust guttered on the creek. Now, in serene attitudes of dance, the dead in glossy death are drawn in ancient light.
On January 15th, 1891, the 4,000 remaining ghost dancers finally surrendered to General Miles. Armed Indian resistance in the West had ended.
Wounded Knee happened yesterday. For Lakota people, Wounded Knee is today. Wounded Knee represents all the frustrations of those years and years and years on the reservation. Even though it happened in 1890, it's fresh in Lakota people's minds and in their hearts. That tragedy, that destruction, that devastating thing that happened to them, it exists today. It exists in our hearts and our minds, the way we think. When we talk about Indian-white relations, that's the first thing that comes to mind. We'll never forget Wounded Knee.
Hard to even know what to say after all of that. So, just to sort of recap all of this, the US Army was feeling threatened by the Lakota people. A lot of that was because they were ghost dancing. They were dancing for hope of a better future, and that was extremely threatening to the US government. They thought, this has to be some kind of war dance. Ghost dancing became so prevalent at a certain point that children were not attending their boarding schools that they were supposed to be attending. Trading posts were left empty. Farms were left unattended. People just had to be participating in ghost dancing. So this is what leads all of these government officials to start panicking and to ask for reinforcements, which leads to this very specific moment at Wounded Knee where Sitting Bull and other chiefs bring their people to try to protect them into a further point inside of the Badlands. And then, as we learned in this video, the US Army descends upon this people, and there's this very specific moment where the dust is thrown and the deaf soldier is trying to be disarmed, which leads to this massive miscommunication of what's happening in this moment, which leads directly to the massacre of Wounded Knee. Almost everybody who was there who was native passed away, but primarily was women and children. This is still considered one of the worst massacres against Native Americans by whites to this day. And there were obviously bodies thrown into a mass grave, and so the count of how many people passed away is a little bit unknown, but it's an estimated 250. It's a rhetorical question, but what's been lost? You can't Sundance, and you can't ghost dance, and you can't be free on the lands that have held your lifestyle for thousands and thousands of years. What can you do? How do you resist? That's really small. I should have made 2 slides. Okay. It's a bit of a heavy place, but I'm here to answer any questions or talk with all of you.
One moment, miss.
What about right now? What's happening in this part of our country right now? Because there definitely are still tensions, and I was just wondering if you are aware of how they're being expressed today.
You know, I am not super current on everything that's happening to this day. I know that there are still people who are fighting over government laws and regulations that are being placed on them, but I'm not an expert on what is going on at this moment.
What music do they have? There's dance, but do they have music associated with all of these dances?
Yeah, primarily drumming and singing and chanting, things that were very communal and that they could do as a group.
I have been to an area called Devil's Lake in North Dakota. So this is a little further north than where South Dakota, where these events occurred. They have a reservation that I believe is 46 square miles. We went there, and I'm going again in a month. We go there to help the people, whether they need repairs on their homes, whether they need encouragement to receive things from the community. There is a Spirit Lake ministry there that we go to support. The 2 people that run it, husband and wife, have adopted 2 of the Native American girls that are there, and they're supporting them in their education and helping them to receive, I don't know what their interests or majors are, but they're working with them. One of my friends who went with us was talking to one of the gentlemen who was doing a drumming ceremony that we were privileged to witness. And so he said to this man, "How big is your reservation?" And I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it was 46 square miles. So my friend Bob said, "Wow, that's pretty big." To which he replied, "It's not big at all. This whole country was ours."
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody knew what to say at that point.
Yeah.
They've been very amenable to us being there, but they're very emotionally tight-lipped.
Yeah.
And I can understand why that is. They have done some demonstrations like how to make fry bread. We're privileged to watch 2 groups of, I would say, teenager to mid-20s, young men and women do the erection of a teepee, and another team erect their teepee, so we're able to watch that. So they're very conscious in that area through a community college and through this mission to teach the youth the things that are part of their culture. So it's very supportive. But their ability to engage and our ability to engage with them is not really strained, but it's not like a reunion or a friendly visit, even though we don't go asking for anything except for them to show us what their life is like and how we can help. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the future of that mission is. I don't feel threatened being there, but many of the young people do not leave the reservation, leaving them with limited financial resources. And so it just kind of turns in on itself. And you can't go in there and say, well, you all have to leave. You know, go someplace where you can take your education as a construction worker and make a life for yourself. Again, we're telling them you've got to leave your people, you've got to go elsewhere and lose your culture. And that is, it's just not a good solution. Even though the education is very useful, sometimes they can make big money. Yeah, but they usually have to leave. And so I don't know, we'll continue as long as we can from our church in North Olmsted, but what the future is for the mission and all, I really don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's very delicate, especially when if they're not interested in participating in capitalism and they don't want money and they just want to be able to live on their land.
I'm wondering if the other dances that they do are as well choreographed or well it's taught as well as these ones are, and are these the two most important dances? How many dances are there that they do?
No, I don't think you can put like levels of importance on the different dances. The ghost dance is very well known because of what happened at the Massacre of Wounded Knee. A lot of the dances are a little bit difficult to research because a lot of them are sacred and they're not shared, they're not talked about, you can't see them, you can't participate in them. But the ones that I have seen videos of or been in a place where they're doing a very performative powwow that people are allowed to witness or participate in, they're all really different. There's all kinds of different costumes, there's grass dances, there's fancy dances, there's jingle dresses, and they all have very, very specific footwork and things that are happening. And I would assume that most of that's just passed down through an oral sharing of, you know, teaching young people how to do it and them just sort of growing up in this, everybody is dancing, it's part of our embodied experience in this culture. But there's lots and lots and lots of kinds of dancings for lots and lots of reasons.
This question is kind of an aside. In Florida, there are a number of casinos that are owned and operated by different tribes. And I wonder if that's true in the Great Plains and how that might help the greater Indian communities.
This is an excellent question, which I don't have any information on, although I have been driving through, we drove from Texas all the way up here, and I believe that there are these sort of casinos all over the United States. Maybe you have an answer to this or a thought.
Yeah, we live in Central Valley, California, and there's gambling places all over run by the different tribes. I mean, everywhere you go, there's what, 2 or 3 within an hour of our house. I've never been to one, but they make a lot of money, but they also cause problems. You know, there's a lot of alcohol and stuff like that. So on another note, while I have the microphone, it appears to me that since Old Testament times, the human being has massacred and killed other human beings that are different, and it's the state of being human and it will be that way, I believe, until the second coming. And it's sad, and I almost got sick watching that movie up there.
Yeah.
And it bothers me a lot about my religion, the fact that a lot of these wars, many of them were over religion. So all I know is I can pray about it and work on things in my square mile. And but boy, it's people are just not good, I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that sometimes. What if European colonizers had never made it to America? Well, the native tribes were fighting each other. Not that it is an excuse for us to come here and you know, well, just everything that has happened. Maybe there were other ways that we could have coexisted and learned from each other and built something together instead of this genocide. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't fighting before Europeans came, like you said. It's just, yeah, it's a terrible, terrible part of human condition, which can be very overwhelming when you're just one person who wants to make a change. What do you do? And like you said, I always try to remind myself how to just make change in the realms where I exist and to be the best that I can be and to love hard on the people that are in my world and in my circles and do the most good I can possibly do. Yeah.
My husband and I have also participated on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation for a number of years, associated with our church. I do not believe at this point in time, I could be wrong, so I don't want to say for sure, but there is no casino in Pine Ridge. They have chosen to kind of stay away from that. Now, we have not gone the past couple of years because it's a rough couple of weeks, and we're getting older. So we haven't gone, but and I wasn't here. So I'm sorry for the whole lecture, so I don't want to repeat anything. But you know, it's just such a hopeless thing, especially for the youth. I mean, there is a college on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. There's a college there, but the youth typically do not want to leave the reservation. So even if they go to the Lakota College, they want to stay there. But things are still so bleak for them, and you know that's one reason why the alcoholism is so high there. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've already covered all this, but it's exactly how this gentleman said. They always appreciate the fact that we're coming, but you know, we even found that when we were there and when we would be doing the things which usually involved construction and you know things of that nature, they don't help. They stand around and watch, and it's just an interesting dynamic. And you have to kind of just look at it that way. You know, we're not here expecting them to help us and to just be falling over us with thankfulness, because that's not what you're going to get.
Right.
So you can't look at it that way, but it's just, it really is such a sad thing. But to my knowledge, there is not a casino on the Pine Ridge Reservation, but I could be wrong about that.
How did the Canadians learn to deal with Native Americans, and why were they different than U.S.? What happened? I mean, both from European stock, English. Of course, there was a French influence too, but how did things happen differently in Canada versus U.S.?
Oh my gosh, what an amazing question. That is not what I am prepared to answer today. That is definitely a research topic I'm going to have to dive into and get back to you about. My research today is really just on the Sundance and the Ghost Dance and what happened at Pine Ridge. But, you know, I was looking at a map because I was just learning. This is my first time in Lakeside, y'all, and Lakeside's pretty awesome, pretty special. And I was looking at the map and just trying to, like, ground myself in where I was, and I was kind of shocked at how close we are to Canada. I was like, oh my, it's right there. Yeah, but I don't know how things were different and what things were the same. So I don't feel comfortable even trying to answer that question, but it's definitely an interesting question that I will probably start researching once I get back home. So sorry I can't help you, but thank you for the question.
Well, thank you very much, Annika.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lakeside.